What is a fallacy? Can you tell me what a fallacy is? Statue face dude, what's up? I can't see your name.
Oh, my name is Imperator Philippus Erebus, which I'm sure some of you are aware that that's a Syrian Roman emperor from the 3rd century.
Okay, what's up, man?
I just was piqued. My interest was piqued by the title of this space. I don't really know what it's all about, and I wondered if you could just give a quick summary of what you're doing.
Yeah, so I just usually open this up to theistic debates on the topics of things like church history, Christianity. I defend Orthodox Christianity, so we usually open it up to atheists or Roman Catholics or Protestants, evangelicals, whoever wants to come on, agnostic. And typically we end up arguing for topics that relate to, philosophy, theology, apologetics, that kind of stuff.
My personal spiritual philosophy is probably closest to something like Neoplatonism, and I appreciate the old Roman pagan customs of like ancestor reverence. And my personal viewpoint would be, what do you think the relevance of Christian doctrine is to the problems of the modern world? Because I'm kind of a lapsed Catholic, and I tried going back to church recently, and I just did not find any kind of comfort in what the priest was saying. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Well, I don't blame you for not being that interested in the Roman Catholic world, but I believe the Orthodox Church is the true church, so I think it has the answers to all of man's hopes, desires, and dilemmas. So I think it offers ethics. I think it offers meaning. It offers communion and union with God. I mean, I think it offers all those things that certainly the modern world not only lacks, but the modern world is really kind of in my view, a desolate, empty place in terms of what it offers as answers to man's ills. So psychology and humanism and transhumanism and all of these things I think are basically empty and in no way can give man meaning or hope or ethics or anything.
That's an interesting question. So you think ethics is something dictated, not something that can be sort of instinctually reasoned from one's own logic?
I think that all the different ethical schools or theories might have some truth to them. I think that you could have, I wouldn't boil ethics down to just strict dictates. I think there's consequential elements to ethics. I think there's normativity in ethics. I think there's objectivity in ethics. So I think there's a lot of different relevances for different positions in ethics is what I'm trying to say. So I think the Ten Commandments are a great tool for, I don't think they're only pragmatic, but I think they are pragmatic. But I wouldn't be just a pragmatist in ethics because I think that the Ten Commandments works. I also think that it's true.
Because you often hear people say that without some sort of explicit spiritual doctrine that people would have no ethics, which I always find to be such an interesting statement, because to me, I think that ethics are pretty rational. Like, you can have a rational basis for ethics, and you should have, you shouldn't just be what you're told to do. It should be, you should have good reason for why you want to do it.
Well, I would say that maybe a better way to frame that argument would be that, not that you can't have any ethics, but there's not a way to justify the ethics, right? So I would say that philosophy, the way I would argue that would be that if you don't believe in some kind of personal God, then there's not a way to have any epistemic grounding or justification for your ethical norms.
Yeah, I disagree with that, because I think that the grounding would be one's own experience and knowledge of what causes pain. I guess that's kind of a utilitarian viewpoint, but we all experience pain. We all experience suffering. We can know what causes suffering.
Well,
directly.
Okay, but why? Why simply because we know what causes pain ought we to choose to not inflict pain? I mean, and by the way, how do we know that that's the universal experience?
Well, I guess how do you know that there's anything? I mean,
well, I mean, I would give philosophical argumentation as to how I would know those things, but I'm saying if you're going
to get to a very like Cartesian kind of argument about
no, I don't think Descartes has good arguments. I'm saying if in your position, based on what you just said right there, I would just simply ask you, well, how do you know that that's universal experience? First of all, that we all know pain and suffering. I mean, maybe we do, maybe we don't. How do you know that? And then I'm asking a separate question, which is that why ought we to choose simply because we know the source of pain and suffering that we shouldn't inflict pain or that we shouldn't choose pain?
Well, obviously there's times where inflicting pain and suffering are merited when it's in self-defense. But I think...
Okay, but so now we have a qualification, and but why? Like, why is self-defense the qualification there?
Because you have a right to limit your own suffering.
Well, so where do rights come from?
I mean, I think most people would. I think most people would.
Well, that's a fallacy of consensus or appeal to the masses. What does most people have to do? So what?
Well, any religion is also a consensus. You have to believe that most people have faith.
I don't believe that.
What would you say a religion is then? How do you get people? Because you have to. What would be your?
Religions have people who have consensi, but that doesn't have anything to do with whether it's true or false. I mean, you could have
But it has everything to do with, because most religions aren't just about divine punishment. They also give dictates for temporal punishment based on the ethical guidelines they set out. So it's not just that God's going to punish you; it's that it gives people the right to punish other people.
Okay, but that's a better, more consistent, coherent grounding and justification for ethics than what I heard you give, which was pain, pleasure, and consensus.
Well, I think you think that just arbitrary doctrine is a better argument for consensus than people recognizing that most people probably experience pain in a similar way. And that
hold on. Why is it arbitrary? I wouldn't say it's arbitrary.
Why is it not arbitrary? Who wrote it down? Who verified it?
Well, the argument would be that the worldview as a whole is coherent and consistent and can give a justification for things like ethical norms. And what I'm saying is...
How is it coherent and consistent? Who decided that?
It's not a authority decision. It's an objective principle, or it's an objective argument about the worldview as a whole. So I'm saying that the Christian worldview gives an account for those things, and there's a basis in that worldview for why there is universality to ethics, or why there's universals at all. And I'm saying
assuming that you take the doctrine of Christianity as a fact. But what about people who don't take the doctrine of Christianity
but that has nothing to do with the argument being true or false. So you keep appealing to things that are kind of irrelevant to the argumentation. So I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying that...
What do you mean?
That's a fallacy of irrelevance. However many people agree or disagree has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of the argument. I mean, if I polled a bunch of people who said that they don't think you exist... does that have anything to do with the truth or falsity of whether you exist? Of course not.
No, but if you're trying to create a universal ethical standard that you want to hold other people to, not just yourself, then the truth of it...
Well, the consensus of the people, again, has nothing to do... That's a fallacy of consensus. It has nothing to do with whether it's true or false.
I guess what would be the reason that you would believe a doctrine handed down to you has greater truth and just greater truth than using your own logic to reach a conclusion about what is good?
Because my logic itself has to appeal to some kind of universal logic for it to be coherent and consistent. And that requires some kind of omniscient divine mind, and I don't have that, but God does. So that makes sense.
But how are you certain that the doctrine that was handed down to you comes from God?
Well, there's different ways I could go about checking to see if that's the case. If you're asking for like evidences, one evidence would be that the Old Testament, for example, has probably 100 or 200 messianic prophecies that are specific about the time, date, and life of the Messiah. So that's one evidence that's super strong, predicting, when he would come, what he would do, he would die, etc. So isn't
that kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy? If I say someone's going to come and then someone says they're the person at the right time, when you already said there was supposed to be a person who was going to come.
It's not just again, it's like hundreds of prophecies that note where he would be born, under what empire, what would happen in his life, the destruction of the temple, that he would die, be put to death, that he would be a son of David. I mean, that it's hyper specificity. It's not just it's not like Nostradamus, like there'll be a dude and he'll do this. No, it's hyper specific.
But how do you even know that the Old Testament is consistent across time for the prophecies you're laying out?
Well, the irony is that even if I believe that it is, and that's a doctrine of faith, sure. But the irony is that even liberal scholars will admit that the book of Daniel, for example, it's at least 2 centuries prior to the coming of the Messiah, and it predicts the empire under which the Messiah would die. And in Daniel 7, it says that the temple will be destroyed. It says that he would be killed. So there you go.
I mean, are you certain that Daniel has been consistent across time? But also, what level of specificity? Does it say specifically the Roman Empire in Daniel?
Daniel lists the empire after the empire that he lived under, which was the Greeks. So yes.
Well, that could be any empire, and the Greeks weren't really even an empire.
Yes, they were. They were an empire under Alexander the Great, and then have you read the Maccabees?
Well, that's not really the Greeks per se. That's the Hellenistic empires. It would have been like.
So Alexander doesn't. Okay, so if you read the book of Maccabees, it's considered in that text to be the Greek Empire. So even if it's not the equivalent,
empire.
They're called the Greeks in the text. So whether you take issue with the terminology, that's fine. I'm just saying that the terminology of Daniel 9 is very specific about when he would come, what would happen, and under the empire following the empire of Daniel's day. And I'm just saying it doesn't matter how liberal you find the scholarship, they all agree that Daniel was written prior to the coming of Jesus, and that's at least 2 centuries prior to that. So I mean, you have a lot of responses, but I don't detect that you even know anything about this topic, which is fine. I'm not expecting you to necessarily, but I mean, I would think that if you wanted to rebut something like messianic prophecies, you would know that. I mean, it's not just some guy said there'd be a dude coming in the future, right? You would at least know something about the historicity of the book of Isaiah, for example, or like Isaiah's widely attested to in the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example. So, are you familiar with the book of Isaiah?
The point isn't to debate. Well, my point, anyways.
Well, you asked me for evidences of why I would trust those books, and I'm giving you various texts, and I'm not detecting that.
The point isn't that you have explanation. The point isn't that you have doctrinal explanations. The point is that you are appealing to your own reason.
Sure. Well, you asked me what you asked. It's not my own reasoning. My reasoning is a faculty. There are a lot of people
you
can't distinguish between the principles themselves and the faculty of reasoning. So I have a faculty of reasoning, but you asked me for why I believe those things, and I'm giving you the answers. So you might not like those things.
Why are your reasons for why you believe those things any different than my own empirical, logical reasons?
Because I don't think you can give an account for knowledge at all if you're an empiricist.
How can you give an account for knowledge?
How are you an empiricist if you're a Neoplatonist?
I don't understand that question, to be entirely frank.
All right. Let's move on.